Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Exciting times all around. We are live across platform again. Super exciting. If you're on LinkedIn, check us out. Come on down to one of the other streams. Twitch is always a fantastic spot if you have any buffering issues on LinkedIn. So far, Stream Health is good. But again, come on down. Try the other platforms if you want to. Comment section is always open, so if you have a comment, something you want to chat about, throw it in one of the chats. I am tracking them across multiple screens, but happy Friday. Let's get excited about some really interesting technology and how it's going to impact different users. Today we're going to be talking about something that I recently learned about and something that I think is super interesting. So Google is launching a new sensor, and it is a sensor that allows you to interact with different items, potentially tablets, thermostats, etc., without actually having to touch anything. And personally, I think that is awesome, mostly because it is inclusive for some that may have disabilities, but it also unlocks some really interesting things in the future. So that's really exciting. So when we think about hand tracking and what that what that traditionally looks like, the hand tracking is pretty straightforward, right? What we do is we will we'll track hands through cameras. Okay, so if I'm wearing a headset and MetaQuest Pro 2 or the Oculus, right, I'll have controllers on the Oculus, but if I wanted to use hand tracking, it'll use 2 cameras or 4 cameras that are in front of the visor to do hand tracking, which is great. It's very feasible. There's been a ton of optimizations from that, but there is some interesting things happening with this Google sensor that I really didn't think would be out and impacting potential users. So pretty excited about that. So with that, we are going to hop on over to Soli and the screen share. Oh, before we do that, for those of you that don't know, Rob Petrosino, futurist technologist, all passionate about emerging technology. This is Synth Reality Podcast. Our goal here is to educate others about technology that's coming out into the market, understand how we can push ourselves and other organizations to adopt this technology and gear up for the future of everything from commerce to training across the board. So let's transition over. Okay, so Soli, Google's new sensors that came out are pretty interesting. We're going to see some videos and we're going to go through some stuff and we're going to chat and understand how this works. But basically, through radar, they are using a sensor to acknowledge a person and or gesture. And I think it's really interesting, kind of best, seen in some of these video clips, and we'll play some of these just so everyone can see them. But what they're doing is allowing or using a small chip. Chip is pretty tiny, right? And it tracks disturbances in radio frequencies when someone moves closer to it or further away to it, and it can identify the volume, right, of the radio frequencies that are interrupted. What that means is it understands to a degree when you put your hand in front of that sensor versus when you put your face in front of that sensor. So to give a nice little visual description is this scene right here where we see a user move towards and then into a specific location related to that sensor. So the radio frequencies are being pushed out as that user moves to and towards and away. It knows roughly where that user is and then aligns to them and their location, which is really really interesting, right? So if I don't have cameras enabled now, I can actually move my hands or move my body, and it'll actually register that same information that we traditionally have, which is great, right? Which is what we want to see for especially uh, disabilities, inclusion, making sure that we're empathy first. One that I wanted to call out here in this video is that it also understands the approximate location of the person and if they're paying attention or not. So the sensors are good enough to understand which direction the person's looking in, whether they're tilting their head left or right, or they're looking towards or away from the sensor, because it understands volume from those radio waves that basically wrap around the user, which is really really interesting, and it's definitely an impressive way that it's going to be used. So when we think about potential product experiences, Google does a really good job here of laying these ones out, right? If I have a tablet and on that tablet I want to wave my hand in front of it and change from a different song or different setting, it's definitely possible. If I want to have some motion controls over my camera, we can traditionally done via camera, we can actually do that directly on this new sensor. But the one that I think are really interesting is this Nest thermostat and a sleep sensing. So if I'm using a thermostat, I actually don't need a touch or a dial or a widget or a crown to turn and change that information. I actually can do that directly by touching the device itself. The same thing with sleep experience. It's going to be able to monitor how often you sleep and how that actually looks. So pretty interesting on that side. A lot of different ideas, but here's the general feedback and purpose of this is it's a low power invisible sensor that's totally private and doesn't capture images, right? The issue with hand tracking or face tracking or anything like that is that there's image recognition that happens even if it's on device versus off device. It has to understand face tracking, hand tracking, etc. Where on the private aspect of things solely is actually not a camera, so there's no visual images that are captured. So this could potentially open up the possibility of using hand tracking, facial tracking, that type of stuff in those hyper secure environments. And again, here's what that looks like from a chip perspective. And I want to drill into some of the UX UI cases here. So there's this kind of implicit and explicit UX and UI that'll happen when someone is within a space or acknowledging a sensor. It will be able to be visualized and shown to the user, right, just by the fact that there is disturbances in those radio waves. And when we look at something that's implicit, like, hey, I'm actually interacting with this, it'll know to the same degree what information is being shown here, right? So you're getting this nice, beautiful swipe experience. Again, really interesting. There is a ton of different movements that are already available. The sit and awareness one is what we saw above, but multi-user looks extremely interesting since there's multiple sensors that could be displayed on a specific experience. You can have multiple users in presence or engaged with the sensor and then be able to be interacted with. The ones that I think are interesting is the idea of lean, turn, and reach. So lean is pretty interesting where it's rotating the content, right, in theory. You can see it from this box here, and I use that as content. It understands that I'm here, and then as I lean into it, it's going to rotate that content directly towards me. So as it rotates that content towards me, it's actually spatially aware, and it's spatially aware beyond traditional, tracking that's done via camera, because it's understanding directly through sensors versus camera positioning and image location and body tracking. It's doing it in a different way. This turn one is very interesting as well. So as a person walks up to this, it'll sense that it's there. As you turn to it and as you turn away, it'll interact with you. And then reach is pretty interesting too. It'll actually engage with you as you reach towards the object and determine that your hand is in presence. The last two are nice as well. They have a dial experience, so as I take my fingers and turn them in front of the sensor, it's actually going to turn that dial up or down. It'll also give me a slider effect, so it's using so as I hold my hand up to the camera here, it's using your finger as a baseline and then using the registration of your thumb to move that slider back and forth, and that's how they're doing it. So as these radio waves hit this, you're able to actually move your finger back and forth and interact with that slider. And then the swipe, right? I'm giving that same radio information and it's moving from one side to another, where the dial and the other slider experience is a little bit smaller, right? It's a little bit less than a full swipe. So interesting things to kind of keep in mind, interesting ideas related to a very powerful chip that is tiny, compact, low frequency, and allows you to have interactions in ways that you really couldn't imagine. So if you're interested in this, ap.google.com/Soli. Check it out. The research is incredibly impressive. So some really interesting things that are coming out between their partnerships that Google has. So definitely check this out. Check out gesture waving and think this could be directly impacting your users more than you realize in the future, right? If we applied this to a training situation in a warehouse, if I have a radio sensor while I'm doing a specific task and I don't need to be hands-on, but I can use my hand to interact with it, because of that frequency, and it's in a secure environment where I don't have a camera. Great. Privacy concerns. I think the big one is, people with disabilities, those types of experiences, allowing them to have a new way of interacting with different objects in their daily lives, all the way through retail, right? This is a privacy positive digital billboard interaction tool potentially, right? If one of these sensors is sitting on the top of a billboard, we could easily see this being a way to turn that content or interact with that content in a really different and interesting way. So I'll leave this this last little note up here, right? As those radar sensors come out, they are bounced back and they're able to be detected by the sensor so that it can see open and close and different hand aspects of it, right? So it's emitting, reflecting, and then recognizing what those signals are. Really, really interesting technology overall. Definitely something that I would look at and potentially integrate in some future areas. So great concept. Check it out. Super cool. Nice little conversation for a Friday. Happy Friday to everyone that's out there. Have a great day. Again, Rob Petrosino, Futurist, the Synthetic Podcast. Throw us a follow. Throw us a comment. Share, like it, engage with us on any platforms. And if you have any questions, reach out. We'll chat about it. Always happy to chat with viewers that are out there. So thank you again, and looking forward to talking to you all very, very soon. I'll see you guys on the other side.